There is a story about, I think it's differently attributed in different places, but it's about Red Riding Hood, where she is lost in the forest and she sees two, three ways forward, but she doesn't know which one to take. So she sees a bird nearby on a tree, and then she goes to the bird and asks the bird, which road should I take? Which path should I follow? The bird asks her, where do you want to go? The bird asks the girl, where do you want to go? So the girl says, I don't know. The bird says, you can take any road. Okay. This is a very simple but very effective story, which also connects back to what Ravi and Andy said. Many times when we start our career, it's a myth that we know where we want to be in 20 years' time, 10 years' time, and all that. It's more a journey that we would like to take, what we would like to have in that journey. I think this is a simple story to tell people what is it that you want to do. Do you know? Maybe no. Maybe I'm not sure what I want to do. So I'm trying to use a story and an image to tell the same thing that I just told in words. Another story, because this is about storytelling. So there is this famous experiment apparently done more than 100 plus years ago, where there were two pots of water. One was already filled with boiling water, a pot filled with boiling water. Another pot was filled with normal water but put to boil on a gas stove, on a burner. So one pot is already having boiling water, another pot has water which is yet to be boiled. So the researcher took two frogs apparently and put one in each of them. So he put one frog in the just kept to boil pot where the water is still not very hot, and put the other frog in the already boiled water. So the frog that was put into the already boiled water pot jumped out because it felt it was too big a shock, too big a change, too big of a delta to handle. So this picture is trying to show that frog. The other pot, which had normal water, the frog kept floating, having a good time, just continue business as usual. But underneath it, it was getting boiled. The burner was on. Over a period of time, the water became too hot, and by the time the frog realized it is too hot, it was too late to do anything too useful, and it died in the pot. The lesson is very simple. It is important, if you go back to what Ravi said, we have a new normal now, and we none of us, to be frank, I feel know exactly what will be the new normal, but all we are sure is that it will not be the old normal. Okay, in that case, how do we react, how do we respond, and how do we behave in a time of flux, time of change? So there is nothing called in hindsight everything is easy, but when you're going through the change, it's very difficult. So this story was like a wake-up call. Okay, let's see if this video can be played. Usually people miss it and ask me for a rewind, so I'm playing it back. So this is telling us exactly that. There is a moment of change, and the kid in front of us, directly facing the camera, has actually missed that moment of change. But since everybody is clapping, he feels it's the right thing to do. Many times don't we recognize this behavior of ours where we join because everybody is doing it and we exactly don't know why everybody is doing what they are doing. I think these are the moments of turning points, inflection points in our life where we could look back and say, hey, wait a minute. Just because everybody does not make it right. Just because nobody is doing does not make it wrong. So let me have my own reason of why I should. So treat this situation that we are going through also as a kind of alarm, wake up call, as you say, to change what we need to change for ourselves. Okay. There was a gentleman who wanted to learn how to jump from the air. So he practiced a little bit, like it's seen in the picture. And after a while, he learned how to use the parachute himself, tying it, untying it, putting it back, everything. So once he got proficient, then he said, "Oh, you know what? I should have my own parachute. Like we all try to have our own car, for example." So he goes to a shop to buy a parachute for himself, and the shop is run by a guy who has been parachuting for many years. So he asks him, which kind of parachute do you want? Of course, he's not that proficient, the guy who went to buy. So he said, can you advise me which parachute is good to buy? So the shopkeeper shows 3, 4 models and say this second one is good. So this guy is smart who has gone to buy. So he says, why do you recommend the second model? So the shopkeeper says, whoever has bought this parachute has not come back and complained. Okay. So many times we get to hear things, we get to see things, we get to make meaning out of it. We have, we will never be unambiguous of what the shopkeeper told and what the buyer understood. So it's today you could be the shopkeeper, tomorrow you could be the buyer. So we all have to deal with what is called the contextual understanding of a sentence, right? It's very important that you know what the message is. The message by itself is never complete. You cannot ask somebody, is knife good or bad? Depends on what it is used for. So the whole point here is when you want to understand something completely, you have to build a context to it. Okay. And otherwise you'll always be saying, is it what you actually said? Are you sure this is what I understood is what you meant? We have all the time this conversation because today there is a huge and perhaps over communication that we all are facing with. We have at least 6, 7 channels coming to us, getting information. Once I did a test on I sent a message and checked how long it takes to before it comes back to me. It took about 9 hours before it came back to me. Somebody forwarded to me, say, hey, look, this is interesting. So why I'm saying this is when we're communicating, the communication itself is not the key. The response to communication is the most important thing. We don't communicate because we have time to do. Many people do that, I know, but we communicate in a context of we want to achieve something, we want to get something done. So if you look at this picture from the right side, if I put a light for this cylinder, of course I will see a rectangle or a square depending on what the size of the cylinder is. But it is also true that I could see this shape. Now, both there is something called true things and there is something called the truth. Perhaps it's fair to say that nobody can see both of this at the same time. This is more an illustration, so it's easier to demonstrate what we're trying to say. So every situation has a perspective. Every situation does create a context as well, right? If you use that context, there's a very interesting research going on between head and the heart. A lot of people might have heard about this gut feel. It has been also a lot of research in that area. It's an area close to my personal interest, so I follow those research there as well, which says that there are decision connections from your gut to your brain. So it's not just the old people were idiots to believe certain things. I always believe, even in the old times, all things old are not bad and all things new are not good. There were also good people in the old time, there were stupid people in the old times. Even now there are stupid people and there are good people. So the whole point here is, like there was a connection between the gut feel in decision making and the so-called rational decision making, there is a connection between the brain and the heart. Usually if you look at it carefully, they are not in sync. They react differently because they're wired differently, their inputs are different, their transfer function is different. So since we're all engineers, it's easy to talk this language. So usually the brain is using things to look at things from the past generally, right? Experiences, observations, memories, blah blah blah, while the heart is trying to look ahead. Oh, should I do this? What would happen if I do this? How can I encourage this? How can I believe this, etc. So it's more backward looking, the brain, and the heart is more forward looking, and usually they are not in sync. And it's very important in the storytelling process that you bring them to sync. You as the storyteller have to make them synchronize. Why is it important? Why is it important that they need to be connected? Today, research has proven that the heart is more powerful than the brain. You might be surprised, you might be thinking that the brain sends signals to the heart. Yes, it does. But almost 20, 30 times more, the heart sends signals to the brain. That's the beauty of what the new understanding is today. That means the heart is telling more things to the head than the head is telling to the heart. Let me give an example. If you have a certain, suppose you when you see something that you don't like, some people get angry. Okay, they get irritated. Okay, and when they get irritated, the heart sends a signal to the brain saying, you do this, you trigger this reaction. Okay, now that is the power that the heart has over the brain. Actually it's controlling what is seen to be outside, is the internal algorithm that is running behind. It's very important that it's connected because actually your heart is driving your long-term, understanding and commitment.
chance it would have
Connect
landed in
these
the
two
spam,
together.
or there would have been a mismatch in the email, etc. So you will have to write to the email ID given in the ictacademy.in/KaiCampus website, and our team is there to help you to get it sorted. And you can also reach out to any of our relationship manager as stated, whom you are contacting in your state. So they will coordinate and facilitate things for you to get your certificate.
May I request all the
So we are
participants to please mute
getting close to
yourselves and also turn
1,700
off your
participants
video?
so far. We will be waiting for another 1 to 2 minutes
Talking
before we
without.
start the session. Hopefully, we wanted to start once 2,000 plus participants join in, and then we. Mr. Balaji, yes, definitely the next season starts on Monday. We are going. We will be releasing the schedule and opening registrations tomorrow. Somebody's asking next season
Can you meet everyone?
the participation limit of participants maximum
May I
5,000.
request all the
Next
participants to
season,
mute
anyway, the new
yourselves and
registration
please
as
do
a college, you
microphones and make sure you
or
mute
as a
yourselves.
coordinator of this program, you can nominate different set of
Pawan,
teachers, or
can
you
you
can
mute them?
invite different set of teachers from your institution.
Sir,
No,
I'm
it
trying to
is up
mute
to your
everyone.
choice.
It is,
Looks like some crosstalk.
I don't see anybody unmuted now except,
I think it's a crosstalk. Okay, maybe it's
yeah.
it's okay now. So let me go back. Yeah. So once you can connect the head and the heart for storytelling, it's very important to understand why they are not connected. Okay, as engineers, we see things as black box. It's very normal and comforting and satisfying and comfortable for us to see there is a black box. So that means if I present certain data, people should understand that that is a data. What's the big deal? I'm giving you information, I'm giving you data, I'm giving you charts, I'm giving you XYZ scenario. Please understand it, there is no big deal. But it is always that the understanding is something else. What you input to the system, and you consider a person as a black box, that those of you who studied DSP will remember linear time invariant system. It's always the same thing. If you give X, it will always give Y. No, people are not like that. Different people have different transfer function, and that means they have different way of processing information and understanding things. So people can have different experiences based on which they'll come to different conclusion. So it's, if you want them to conclude that what you have given as an input as an output, you need to take responsibility of how to present your information. There is always for any given activity or a communication, there is always a why you are communicating that. There is a so what to that. That means if you communicate this, there is a certain benefit. The benefit could be you want people to support you, you want people to vote for you, you want people to take action, you want to people to follow your instruction, whether it is to stay indoors like we have today in COVID-19, anything. But there is also a how to it. How do you do that thing? But the this is rather understood by people. These are more logical things. But the bigger picture is the contextual thing, the frame, the reference of why you are talking about the how, why, and so what. I think this is the important part of a storyteller. How do you communicate? This is the reason I'm talking to you. The reason I'm talking to you today about art of storytelling is so that your communication get the results that you want to get. If your communication is to make someone change their behavior, you should be able to influence that. You should be able to achieve that. So it could be an incident. So for storytelling, you can use different things. You can use an incident that you saw that happened to you. You could use an analogy. It's very powerful, and it is considered as an act of genius if you can compare two different things for the things that are similar or different. Or of course, you could use a story, your own story, a popular story, an unknown, relatively unknown story, etc. All these things can be used in storytelling, and typically you can use it through pictures you have seen so far, or you can use it through movies, videos, etc. to communicate those incidents, those stories, and your analogies. This is a picture I love, and it is an ad for it's sugar free. If you see the bottom right corner, the Chupa Chups lollipops, there is an ad for being sugar free. And there is all, even if I remove those two words, it's sugar free, you can still make out there is something about this picture that communicates by itself. So storytelling is very powerful where you have made people understand And understanding is temporary, meaning people can forget it. If you want them to take a long-term action, you want to make them believe it for longer, remember it for longer. Okay. So if you look at this video, which will tell you something as well, and you will not see any words in this. So I can use a video, I can use my story, I can use other story, I can use popular story to communicate a message. Why do we communicate using storytelling is logical things are forgotten. You might have experience, what did they say that people were, how many thousand was that number? People forget that. It's quite natural, it's quite normal because it's a kind of RAM, it's not a ROM. So if you want people to remember, you need to use storytelling. Okay, if you want to use people to remember and relate and recollect even, then you have to use videos, because if you this is a symbol, if you know, used in the movie industry for say action. When everything is set, you still have to take the shot and then people have to record it and then it becomes a movie. So if you want people to remember, if you want people to act, you need to use storytelling, because facts by themselves will not be creating conviction. If you want to use storytelling, it will be very powerful because stories stick. If you can see this little clip GIF, it says you, whenever you use stories, people will remember stories. At the end of the day, we all love stories, don't we? Yes. So this is what I wanted to say. Thank you so much. So I told that I'll tell you at the end of this something. Except my title slide and this slide, I have not used a single letter in my entire presentation. Hope it was useful, and thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you all.